Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hands on Hour, uh, brought to you by Canadian Cloud Community. My name is Samir Makwana, and I'm co-hosting today with Mohammed, my dear friend. We are excited to have with us today and our guest speaker, Anna Bordigu. Anna, thank you for joining us. And I would like you to introduce yourself and walk us through what you'll be delivering today or what you're going to show us today.
Sure. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Super excited. Love the initiative of having a hands-on hour and really being able to see how things work in practice. So love it. Let me share my screen then with the presentation slides and I'll get into my introduction. Okay. So my name's Anna. I am a data security consultant at Protiviti. And really day to day, I work with our clients implementing data security solutions, primarily in Microsoft Purview, but really can go across Defender, Entra, and other security solutions as well. I am a Purview MVP, so lots of community work, love these types of user group presentation sessions, connecting with the community, all things that I love doing, and also the co-founder of a user group myself. So if you're interested in connecting or maybe you have any questions after the session, there is that QR code on the screen that you can use to find my LinkedIn. I think it has my blog and then the International Data Security User Group there as well. Okay, so on the agenda for today's session, we'll start off by going through some of the pillars for good AI governance. Then we're going to deep dive into the data security risks. So just foreshadowing, the AI governance pillar that I will focus on in this session is data security. And then we'll also go back and kind of zoom out and look at the Copilot control system and how that can help us achieve AI governance. Before we get into the technical bits, I wanted to share a couple of slides with you on just kind of setting the stage. So first one, AI governance, in my opinion, it cannot wait. This is for three main reasons. The scale with which AI adoption is happening and the scale of the impact of AI adoption is something that I personally have never seen before. It's growing tremendously. And so the need for AI governance is increasing every day. The second is transformation. So AI is really something, of course, that can help to transform your business. It is becoming very quickly a strategic imperative for organizations to deploy various AI solutions in order to really keep up with the scale of innovation that we have going on today in the market. And the third piece is security. So of course, this is where I live. Security, there have been many issues with security with AI rollouts. So I find that AI does two things. First, it can shine a light on existing security vulnerabilities and problems within your environment, which are very important to address. But AI can also introduce new security problems. So especially with things like agents coming into our environments, security is a very big concern. So really the message I want to give you all is the time for AI governance is now. It's very important to define an effective AI governance framework and implement that within your organizations. So getting into the pillars of AI governance, you'll often see these kind of spoken about differently, but this is my view on the pillars of AI governance. The first one is accountability and ownership. So whenever we have a decision around AI, maybe supported by AI, we need to make sure that we have somebody who is accountable for that decision and owns that decision as well. Then identity and access control. So this, of course, applies to how it always applies to users and making sure that we have good identity and access control so our users are protected. But this also now applies to agents as organizations are deploying agents. It is important that the concept of the agent identity is adopted, and that really serves as the baseline for a lot of the security controls for agents specifically. Then we have data security. So of course, I'm a little bit biased to think that this is a very important pillar, but I do genuinely think that good data governance is just absolutely crucial for a successful AI rollout and implementation. And data security plays a really big part in that, in making sure that your most sensitive data is protected, but your users can also remain productive and really benefit from that business transformation while using your data securely. Then we have things like transparency and explainability. So whenever AI, again, makes a decision, we want to make sure that we have a trace of what happened, it's transparent, and really helps to build trust in AI solutions and the outcomes that they provide. Security and threat protection, again, just bringing that up from new threat vectors to shining a light on existing threat vectors. Having human oversight and control. So AI, of course, the scale, the speed at which it operates, it sometimes is hard to remain in the loop all the time, but at least remaining on the loop. So having oversight and being able to control specific bits and pieces of AI function is very important. And then we have lifecycle and change management. So from this piece, from this pillar, I really mean two things: data lifecycle and change management, making sure your data is up to date, but also when we look at things like agents, managing the lifecycle of agents and managing change throughout that lifecycle, just as we do with users. So when we have a good business justification for an agent, creating it, assigning an owner, making sure that as that business justification maybe changes throughout its life cycle, permissions are updated, and then retiring that agent at the end of its life. And finally, compliance and risk management. We know that these regulations, they're coming out every day. There are so many different requirements, and there is a lot of risk with adopting AI. So being able to manage that effectively, all of these things really come into play when defining and implementing a good AI governance strategy. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to focus on the data security pillar of AI governance. Okay, wanted to show a statistic. 99%. 99% of what? 99% of organizations have experienced sensitive data exposure through AI tools. And this is data from September of 2025. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this number was something like 99.9 at this point. So very big data security problem. Okay, now in this session, we're going to focus on AI data security risks, specifically with Microsoft Copilot. I do want to acknowledge there are lots of risks with other AI tools. However, I just wanted to zoom into Copilot for this session. So the key data security risks with Copilot, first we have oversharing. So oversharing, essentially, when a user has access to data that maybe they shouldn't have access to. This is often caused by overly broad permissions that may have been around even before AI was introduced into an organization, but persisted throughout that rollout. This is a big cause for lack of trust in AI tools, maybe sensitive data being raised at scale. So we'll dig into this piece quite a bit today. Exfiltration. So when we consider purely Microsoft Copilot, of course, using sensitive data with M365 Copilot, that's not exfiltration. But M365 Copilot is closely related to exfiltration, and I will justify that statement in the session later on. And then unethical AI usage, so things like trying to push the built-in Copilot guardrails so that you maybe have access to sensitive data that you shouldn't have access to, you have Copilot processing sensitive data, things like that, that can really relate to some data security risks with Copilot. So let's start off by digging into oversharing. And some of the common causes of oversharing that we see in organizations: site privacy being set to public, So a lot of the times your users will be able to discover these sites if they are set to public. And that means that, again, with Copilot, they can have access to that site. Default sharing option is everybody. So a lot of the times, yes, this helps with productivity to have your default sharing link option set to everyone. However, having that as the default means that almost every file within your organization that's shared is going to be shared with everyone. That is just a classic common cause of oversharing, having internally overly broad permissions. Same thing with the next one, everyone except external users domain group. Being able to add that in and share with this domain group, it truly is an overly broad permission. There are valid use cases for using this domain group and sharing. However, I find it's used more commonly than the amount of valid use cases for this group. And finally, sites and files without sensitivity labels. So site and file level sensitivity labels are two very different concepts. However, they both feed into a common cause of oversharing. So site level sensitivity labels, they help us set protections like the site privacy level, public or private, whether a site can be shared externally. Can an unmanaged device access the site? If so, what level of access does that unmanaged device have? Things like that is what we can control with a site sensitivity label. Then we have file sensitivity labels, which are very different, again, of course, applied at the file level, and they can enforce things like encryption controls. And encryption really comes into handy when we want to prevent oversharing and protect data at a file level. So you can specify who has access to a particular file based on the label applied. Is it everybody within the organization? Is it a specific group within the organization? Specific users that are added to the file, and things like that. So on that last point, sensitivity labels, yes, the lack of them is a common cause of oversharing. However, implementing them is also a common solution.
So, Anna, I have a question here on
Yes.
this one. So, with the sites set to public, what tool would you use like to do this? Would you use Purview? Would you use SAM? What exactly would you go for? Let's say that you have an environment with 50,000 SharePoint sites. How would you handle that?
Good question. So having visibility into which sites are set to public, we have it through different places. I will get into details around that. So SAM is a good example of where you can have that visibility, but there is a limitation of 10,000 sites within SAM. So if you have 50,000, that wouldn't cover all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, but let's put a pin in that. It's coming, I promise. Okay, and here it is. So different types of oversharing reports. SAM is the first one I wanted to talk about today. This is going to be in the demo. So SharePoint Advanced Management, I'm just going to use SAM for short. The data access governance reports within SAM, they surface things like whether a site is public or private. Have there been sharing links, like anyone sharing links, or maybe everyone except external user domain group instances of being used on a site level? That's going to surface here. So there's various different reports. I'll show you that in detail in a second. Purview DSPM data risk assessments. So SharePoint Advanced Management lives within the SharePoint admin console. There's some licensing requirements. I won't get into the details there. However, SharePoint administrators will typically use SAM. Purview DSPM data risk assessments, of course, lives within Purview, and data security administrators or compliance administrators will typically go here. So DSPM data risk assessments, it does surface a lot of the same type of insights as SAM. However, I look at it as a view tailored towards data security admins, where it brings in the certain like data on sensitive items found within these sites. So not only do you see if they're overshared, but you also see, does this site does this file contain sensitive information, so you can actually prioritize which sites you're remediating for oversharing. So the next two I'll mention, but we won't have this in the demo. The SharePoint site permissions and sharing report. This is on a site level. It surfaces file level insights. However, you need to download this manually for sites. And there's a limitation that the site needs to be shared with external users in order to have this report downloadable. So just something to note. And then Microsoft Graph Data Connect for SharePoint specifically. This is really something that's built for an enterprise scale SharePoint environment. MGDC, very powerful tool. It runs extremely quickly against very large SharePoint environments because the APIs that it uses are not throttled. It's very customizable. You can bring in the insights into things like the Power BI oversharing report, with which we have a template to use. However, this is paid on a consumption basis. You can kind of help by doing a full data pull at first, and then just doing delta pulls in the future. However, this is truly enterprise scale, very customizable. But today we're going to talk about SAM and Purview DSPM data risk assessments. Okay, time for our first demo.
I use reports and
Samir, you're cutting off. You're not audible.
audible.
A little bit. Try now. Let's see. No, we can't hear you. No.
Oh.
I hear you.
All right. Able to hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Wonderful. I think something wrong with my headset, but I have a question with that last slide where you have 4 different tools, the way of doing reporting.
Yeah.
Is there any tool which can call all 4 and get the data and get something out of it and show you as a combined report or something? Do you think, is there anything there available?
Not out of the box.
Okay.
No. Yeah, that would have to be a custom solution for sure.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good question though. Yeah, because they do have different pros and cons as everything does. So yeah, definitely custom solution would have to be used here.
Yeah, and this is very good, Anna, because I talk to different clients and they either know DSPM or they either know SAM, but having all 4, what value they brings, it's amazing. So thank you for mentioning those 4. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, it's definitely something that I face as well. There's visibility and knowledge about certain tools, but not the entire stack. So I wanted to bring that here.
Cool.
Okay, let me exit out of the presentation and let's get into the demo. So I will just pretend I'm a SharePoint administrator. I'm in the SharePoint Admin Center. To access SharePoint Advanced Management, that's where we're going to start with the demo. You go to Reports, Data Access Governance Reports. When you're here, you have snapshot reports and activity reports. As it sounds, snapshot is a point in time. Activity surfaces activities associated with oversharing over the last 28 days. So we'll dig into a snapshot report and an activity report. First one I wanted to show is the site permissions across your organization. So when you click into here, essentially it's going to surface any broad permissions that you have on a site level. There's also a OneDrive report, but we'll go into this SharePoint report for the demo. So if you click View Report, you'll have a list of sites, and it has lots of data alongside. Of course, you can always download a detailed report for every type of report you see in SAM. And that's just going to download a CSV. Biggest pro here is that the CSV includes up to 1 million sites. So that would kind of help with that limitation. So some of the insights you'll see here on a site level, how many files does the site have? How many items have unique permissions? So here, unique permissions essentially means instances of broken inheritance. Broken inheritance means, okay, we have these site owners, members, viewers that are assigned at a site level. Cool. But we can override those permissions, maybe change the permissions that a particular user that already has access to the site on a file level or on a folder level. We can also add additional users on a file or on folder level. So broken inheritance means essentially an item within that site has unique permissions that are different from the permissions on the site level. So that's what that's going to surface. And oftentimes, oversharing, not all the time, but oftentimes, oversharing will come from those instances where somebody has maybe added the everyone except external users domain group to a file when on a site level they're not added. So that is actually broken inheritance. Then we have total permission users for the site, nothing super special. How many guest users have permission to the site? Are there any external users that have been granted access? How many unique Entra groups have access? So in this case, it's just the owners, members, and viewers that are surfaced. And then, okay, so this is really where we get into the meat of the oversharing reasons. So this is where it's going to surface instances of sharing links that are typically associated with oversharing. So people in your organization, it's quite a broad permission to be assigned. There is one instance of this link in the first site. How many anyone links do we have? Again, very broad permissions. We have one in the site. Then we go to the everyone except external user, triple EU to summarize, permission count. So how many instances of this domain group being shared with have been recognized in the site? In this case, it's 2. So definitely some items are likely overshared, but we do need to investigate in greater detail to see if this was valid sharing or if this is actually oversharing. And then we have the everyone permission count. In this case, it's 0. We also have some additional details. Who's the primary administrator? Is external sharing enabled for this site? What is the site privacy level? Is it public? So is it discoverable by everybody in the organization, or is it private? And then if it has a sensitivity label applied, that will be surfaced here. So for example, restricted special guest. And that sensitivity label, as I was mentioning on a site level, that will then apply external sharing and privacy settings that are applied at a label level for the site. So that can help kind of enforce some of the, or mitigate some of the risks for oversharing.
Question, Anna, what is
Yes.
the everyone permission count? How is it different from
Good
count of?
question.
Mhm.
Yep. So this one typically actually gets brought over from like older SharePoint sites, maybe you migrated. It's very similar. We used to have everyone permission. Then we moved to everyone except
Okay,
external
gotcha.
user domain group. Yeah, which I think for, this is a relatively new tenant. Yeah, I have 0 for the everyone permission count, but the permission that it provides is very similar. It's everyone within the organization.
And I feel like as you showed in the previous slide, so you can take this report and then go to each site and then run the SharePoint report on
Yes.
each site to figure this out, right? Okay.
Yes, if it has been shared externally.
Yes.
Yeah,
Cool.
exactly. Yeah, these are site level insights, of course. What I wanted to show here, so if we select a particular site, we can click on restricting site access. So, you know, when I was talking about the broken inheritance and unique permissions, we can essentially get rid of those right here from the SharePoint admin console as a SharePoint admin. So this would essentially restrict access to the site to only members of the owners and members list that's listed within the SharePoint site. Powerful capability. I say proceed with caution when doing this and make sure to check with the SharePoint site owners before you go ahead and restrict site access in this way. Something else you can do, initiate a site access review. So we did see some instances of potentially overshared items. Let's say that we need input from the SharePoint site owner, because as a SharePoint admin, especially in bigger environments, we don't always have the knowledge on a site level of how should this type of item be shared, how should this type of item not be shared. So we delegate this site access review to the owners of the site themselves, the people who are closest with the content. You can add a comment and then you just send this site access review. There is a limitation, 1,000 site access review requests in a calendar month. And I believe, so off the top of my head, but I think it's 100 sites can be added per site access review request. So just to be aware, there are some limitations. Okay, so wanted to show you, did I get the new one? No, I didn't. Okay, sorry, just finding the right email here. Yes, so I added myself as owner to the site for the demo. I received this email notification that the SharePoint admin has requested for me to review permissions for the site. Cool. I go into view all permissioned content. So I have already conducted the site access review, so it's not going to be exactly what you see. It will be grayed out to manage the access, but I just wanted to show you regardless. This view for site access reviews for permissions, you're going to get files, you're going to get the SharePoint site itself, any lists within the SharePoint site. And it will surface, again, how many users are permissioned to this item, how many groups have been added. You can actually go ahead and see which enter groups are added here. Does this item have a sharing link that's broad? Anyone, people in your org? Yes, in this case. Has everyone except external users been shared here? Yes, for everything. I know this is true because I just added the everyone except external users domain group at a site level. So then, okay, this is grayed out, but you could click manage access and it would be a very similar experience to how you just manage access typically within a SharePoint site. You could then remove certain access, add people if you needed to, and then click OK, and that would fix some of the oversharing problems. Once you're done going through the list as the SharePoint site owner, you could then just click submit for the site access review, and that would bring it back into the portal here for data access governance. As a SharePoint administrator now, I can see all of the review requests that I have sent out. In this case, so we were just looking at this one from May 17th, I can see that the SharePoint site owner has reviewed and completed the site access review. Reviewer comment, everything looks good, boss. So they finished their review. And this is how really we can get visibility into oversharing, but these site access reviews is how we actually go about remediating the oversharing risks. Okay, so that was the snapshot report. Quickly, activity report. Wanted to show you this sharing links report. This is, again, for activity over the last 28 days. Snapshots help for current visibility. Having activity and identifying trends of oversharing activities is also very helpful. No matter how much we do for remediating oversharing, if the same user activities are persisting that led to that oversharing problem in the first place, then we're going to have to keep remediating the oversharing. So this is the type of report that can help surface instances of this user behavior that you might need to address with training, with communications to help that oversharing problem overall. So anyone links, just picking one of the reports there, you'll get a list of the sites that have these anyone sharing links included in them. You'll see how many links have been included, what type of site is it, who's the administrator, does the site have a sensitivity label applied to it, do unmanaged devices have access, external sharing, privacy. So similar insights, but different aggregation, essentially. And then for here, you can also initiate a site access review. Very similar experience. I think it was this one. Nope. Bear with me as I find it. There we go. So very similar experience. Site owners will get an email notification that they have to review anyone links in a particular site that they are the owner for. They would then click into that link. You have these site reviews for files, folders, and lists. And then you can go ahead and see the items that have the anyone links that were issued. And here's where I can show you. If you click on the manage access, you can go ahead, see the people, the groups, and the links that were issued. And then you can go ahead, click stop sharing, and that makes sure that only the owners of this particular item have access. So again, you need to have the context behind the site, behind the particular item in the site, in order to stop sharing and make sure that you're not blocking access for anybody. But you do have that control from here. Let's say we're done with looking through these two items. They should be shared with anyone just based on the business case. You can then go ahead, complete your review. Done. This looks good. Confirm. And again, we get taken through that same workflow. So SharePoint site owner part is done. And then it takes some time to update, of course, but we can then, as the SharePoint administrator, see that the review requests will be updated. It's just generating now, but it will be completed and we'll have a log of those activities here. Okay, so that's SharePoint Advanced Management at a higher level. Next, I wanted to show from a different view now, the purview, data security, posture management, data risk assessments, and hopefully, good, it loaded. Okay, so that was SharePoint administrator perspective. Let's now shift to the data security administrator perspective. In DSPM, this is a solution that very powerful, unifies a lot of visibility across purview, unifies a lot of recommendations for policies that we'll look into in a later demo. One of the key capabilities, as I mentioned from an oversharing perspective, is this data risk assessments report. We have a default assessment. It runs for the top 100 SharePoint sites in your organization based on usage metrics, and it will surface insights at a site level. We can also create custom assessments. So the default assessment, we don't really have control over which SharePoint sites are included, but the custom assessment, we do have control over that. You can create a custom assessment, and then you can bring in item level scanning. So not just site level, but file level scanning as well. It does have some configuration requirements, but it's just a one-time configuration. Fairly simple. You just need to register your Entra app, provide it with the required permissions, and then integrate it with Purview. Then you can look at the users that you want to add and look into for this data risk assessment. And then you can see specific SharePoint sites or specific OneDrive accounts that you want to include in this custom scan. For SharePoint, currently there is a limitation of only having 10 sites per custom assessment that can be added, but you can create as many assessments as you'd like. So just something to note, it's on an assessment by assessment level. Okay, I do need to add scope of site, Pro Canada. That's not going to help. I don't know. Antonio demo, sure. You can scope your site, you can select up to 10, and then you just review and run the data assessment scan. So that will collect the data over the last 30 days. I will cancel out of this and go into a scan that I already ran because it does take some time, of course, to identify and scan the items. So this is a site level scan for SharePoint for this Pro Canada TC site, but I also included item level scanning, which I'll show you in a second. On a site level, you'll have insights into how many items have sensitive information types and are they labeled? So this is key for data security administrators. If you have lots of sensitive information and that sensitive information is not labeled, it will not be protected and it can easily be overshared. You'll also have insights into the sharing links with this nice little graph. You can see how many instances of anonymous sharing links have been created. Have they been used? So in this case, no, it's good. And how many instances of guest access for this particular site. On a site level, won't go through every detail here, but most importantly, we see total sensitive items for the site and how many unique sensitive information types were recognized. So those are the site level insights. Item level insights. This is fairly new capability, very powerful in my opinion, because as a data security administrator, I can get an item level view and I can also take some remediation actions. So let's just take this file here. So sharing link type anyone. That's the file that we were reviewing earlier on. You can see, does it have a sensitivity label applied? No, so not good. Who is the owner of the site? Last modified, things like that. And then you can particularly see this anyone link. If I select this file, I can go ahead, maybe mark the item as resolved. It will be removed from the list. But I can also notify the owner of this file that this is potentially overshared. Please review the oversharing. And then I can also apply a sensitivity label. So protect the file directly from this data risk assessment. And I can also remove the sharing link. This is a powerful capability. Again, very much encourage you to check with the owner that is listed directly here before you go ahead and remove this sharing link. However, when we do have a large scale of oversharing problems, of these types of overly broad permissions being granted, then this can really be helpful in remediating that. Okay, I am running a little bit behind on time, so let me switch back to the
Another question, Anna. So
yes.
This is really powerful. Like this what we
Yeah.
can have right here. The only thing is the 100 site limitation, which is like where we need to do like a new custom assessment every time. Is there a workaround like where we can, hey, I would just like want to review this environment. Imagine like if I have 50 case sites, what would I do?
Yeah. Not at this moment. Right now, the custom data risk assessments, they just have that 10 site limit for specific sites being added. I believe if you go ahead and create this custom assessment and do not click item level, you can include all sites, into the site scope, into the data risk assessment scope. However, that means you won't have those item level insights available to you.
Okay, but would the Graph Data Connect do that? Overcome like this limitation?
Yes,
do you think?
Exactly.
Okay.
But the power behind this is that you can take action from the report, right? To remediate the oversharing. So pros and cons.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, Anna.
Okay. Let me get back into the slides. So we looked at oversharing. Let's look at exfiltration. Copilot has built-in data security controls that can help with this exfiltration concern. There are safety and content protections. Copilot will block things like harmful content, maybe instances of violence. I don't know. It will also help to detect protected material that might be subject to copyright and not work with that, not surface that. It will help block some prompt injection attempts to help bypass or help restrict bypassing Copilot's built-in guardrails. I personally, for testing purposes, have tried many times to push these guardrails for Copilot, and I have not been able to succeed. So very powerful capabilities. No model training on business data. So when you have M365 Copilot and has access to your business data, there is a commitment from Microsoft that no foundational LLM models will be trained on your business data. Business data stays within the service boundary of your M365 tenant. Again, commitment from Microsoft, very powerful, very good to know from a data security perspective. Then data is surfaced in line with your existing permissions. So as a user, if I have access to a document, then I will have access to that file from M365 Copilot. This is exactly why oversharing is such a big concern and something that we need to remediate. But also powerful from a built-in control perspective, because that means that I will not be able to grant myself access through M365 Copilot to very sensitive data. And then this last point, sensitivity label inheritance. So sensitivity labels, again, they apply protections on a file level. The content created by Copilot, whether it's the response itself or if it creates, let's say, a PowerPoint presentation, that will inherit the sensitivity label of the input that was leveraged. So sensitive data will remain labeled. Okay, so those are built in, but I think it's important to talk quickly about how Copilot is related to data exfiltration, because using sensitive data clearly with M365 Copilot in and of itself is not exfiltration of data. So the way I look at it is that Copilot provides rapid access to content, access to potentially overshared content, and allows you to duplicate sensitive data at scale very rapidly. So any exfiltration behaviors that could come after this are really supported through access to the sensitive data with Copilot. So it is important to put some guardrails around what you can do with Copilot and what type of data it can access. So the way we do this, multiple ways, of course, mainly through Purview data security controls. We have data security posture management for visibility and policy recommendations, sensitivity labels, data loss prevention policies, and insider risk management. So we'll go through all of that in our demo. All right, let's start in DSPM. DSPM provides objectives. Objectives are essentially groupings of recommendations to help improve your data security posture, whether it's for AI use cases or not. So if we look into this first data security objective, prevent data exposure with Copilot. Perfect. So when we look here, we have a list of recommendations as part of a remediation plan. Some of these recommendations are policies to be created. Some of them are procedures to be followed, but they can really help you to get started if you don't know where to start in securing your data for M365 Copilot or even just Copilot chat usage. You can click into the different recommendations here. So let's see, let's just do this one here, DLP policy. So I have already enforced this within the tenant. However, you can see some details on the recommended data loss prevention policy. This is saying, okay, protect sensitive content from M365 Copilot interactions. It has some recommendations for which sensitive information types to include. And this is actually a listing of some custom SITs, sorry, not custom SITs, but a custom list of built-in SITs that I included in this. And then we can see what impact it has to users, what are the actions that this policy takes. So things like this. Again, great place to get started and to really help show that you're achieving an objective for improving your data security with Purview policies. Next point I wanted to bring up is the sensitivity labels. So if I go to my Copilot, yeah, let's go here. So I have M365 Copilot. I asked it to generate a PowerPoint summary of a file. It's just a test file, public document. Cool. It worked. We reasoned over it, created this presentation. We have this right here. Not very pretty, but it did its job. It did what it asked. First things first, the chat itself inherits the public sensitivity label because I referenced a public file. Second, the file that was created automatically inherited the public sensitivity label. So public data, not very sensitive, but this really comes into handy when we have sensitive data in a file that is referenced, and that sensitive data is protected by a sensitivity label that applies, let's say, encryption controls. And then that sensitivity label is then applied to the content that's created from Copilot. So even if Copilot did end up duplicating some sensitive data within this PowerPoint presentation, it would be protected by that sensitivity label regardless. Okay, so that is the sensitivity label inheritance portion. Let me go back to Purview, and we'll go into data loss prevention policies. So coming back to sensitive data, protecting what M365 Copilot can access, wanted to show you this policy here. So this policy blocks Copilot from referencing restricted content. Again, the sheer act of having Copilot reference restricted content in and of itself, it's not exfiltration. However, especially when we have oversharing problems in the tenant, then having this type of data loss prevention policy can help avoid surfacing the most sensitive content for your users. So it does come into handy, of course, oversharing, for remediating oversharing, but it can also help to prevent surfacing or processing sensitive data that can then be exfiltrated by your users. So you select the M365 Copilot location, and then you create a rule where you have a condition that the sensitivity label being restricted when files are referenced by Copilot with that sensitivity label applied, they will be blocked from processing this content. Okay, so the impact of this particular control, if we go back to the demo, let's say now I want to generate a PowerPoint summary of this restricted file. I reference it. However, the response I get back is that it cannot go ahead and reference this file. What I do not like about this response is it has a what you can do next, and it actually suggests having a non-restricted version of the file. I don't like that part of the response. It's suggesting the user to kind of go around these controls. I would like to see that part of the response removed, of course. However, just from what we can see here, the policy is working. Then we can do a very similar policy. I won't show you in the data loss prevention portal, but very similar idea. We can block Copilot from processing certain sensitive information types. In this case, in this tenant, I have blocked Copilot from processing credit card numbers. So if I go to this chat and I have a prompt here, is this credit card number real? And of course, it's not a real number, but Copilot says it cannot be completed because we have blocked Copilot from processing or responding to this type of content. So that is actually a success. However, a current limitation with this policy is if I upload or reference a file that has credit card numbers, and this file here has tons of them, then it will succeed. It will actually access the data and create a PowerPoint presentation. This PowerPoint presentation will then have duplicated the credit cards in the original file. So this is one of the pitfalls currently of the policy to be very well aware of. Of course, having sensitivity labels applied to the input file will protect this output file, but you can see the worst case scenario here where that input wasn't labeled at all. So the output is also not labeled and is not protected. Okay. Last point, want to touch on this. I will not demo it. Blocking uploading of sensitive data to third-party AI sites. This session is about Copilot. However, exfiltration from an AI perspective, it is very common to have this concern where if you paste certain sensitive content, if you upload a file with sensitive content to ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc., via the browser, that is really exfiltration. That data can then be trained or used to train the model. It can be surfaced to other users. So what I'm showing here on the screen is just an example of the impact of a policy that we can set up in endpoint data loss prevention to actually block your users from doing that as well. So that is covered with Purview. I just haven't covered it in the demo itself.
This is great. I have I think 1 or 2 questions now.
Yeah.
Am I audible now? I try to fix my headset.
Yeah, I
You're
can
good.
hear you for now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So the reports which we are showing you earlier, the assessments and all, is there any way to schedule it so that, because I think you mentioned when it's a custom report which runs and then it takes around 48 hours to trigger. Is there any option to schedule it and have those reports sent out or something as a summary?
So are you talking about these data risk assessment reports, the custom
Yes.
ones? Yeah. So at this moment, no.
Okay.
And they do expire, as you can see. They expire, I believe it's 30 days after they're ran. Yes, we actually do have a countdown now. So once they do expire, either you have to export this data and have this data somewhere else, or you need to duplicate it and rerun it like net new with the same conditions.
Makes sense. Okay. And another thing, you mentioned there is a SharePoint team or SharePoint admin who has a SPA and that SAM, and they generate the reports and they do work on that. Then there's a data security team or engineers who work on the DSPM and data security, DLP and others. So in a real world project, because you must be involved in many of this in real world projects, how this works together, because every company who wants to do Copilot or AI or build an agents, they have these concerns that they want to make sure they are covered on data oversharing or DLP or sensitive labeling and so on. So how the project structure look like to you in that case? Like, do they work in the same project team, or what's your thoughts on that? If you can share something on that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very fair question. I think a lot of these types of AI implementations, data security implementations, they have that same question of like, who actually owns this? Where should this originate from? I think it depends, right, on who is owning the oversharing problem within the organization. So a lot of the times, yeah, I'd say more commonly, I see that being the SharePoint administrator. And of course, as a SharePoint admin, you wouldn't directly have access into the DSPM data risk assessments. There is a role that you can be assigned to have access, of course, but you would typically live within SharePoint Advanced Management. But then also data security administrators, in order to inform themselves of this oversharing problem, yes, they can communicate with the SharePoint administrator, but it is also very helpful to have this type of insights and controls within Purview as well. So from the perspective of who owns it, I think it just depends on how the organization decides to go about it. But again, typically I do see oversharing being owned more commonly on the SharePoint admin side, but then it is important that data security administrators do have those insights and can create policies based on the insights.
So is it fair to say they both do their own assessment, but data security people more on advisory side rather than doing the action? And then SharePoint people are more of not only doing the assessment, but doing and taking an action, coordinating effort with the site owners and so on.
I'd say so. Yeah, to summarize,
okay.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah,
right.
Can vary, of course, but yeah, having as a data security admin, oh my gosh, data security admin, the controls that we saw within these data risk assessments, I think like it can come into handy and be very powerful when there is an immediate high risk of oversharing with very sensitive data. But I think what the person who would drive remediation for oversharing in general would then be the SharePoint administrator.
Yeah, perfect. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And one last question before
Yes.
I'll let you continue. The DLP policy, which you were showing earlier for Copilot for restricted content and all, does that, because it names as a Copilot, but does that also, so let's say Copilot Studio and Foundry agents, people are building nowadays, and more it's going to be. Do they obey those sensitivity label policy, or is there anything can be done for those kind of agents if it is not obeyed?
Yes. So sensitive, okay. Permissions will be obeyed with those agents.
Okay.
So sensitivity labels that apply encryption will also restrict the access, whether, it's a Copilot Studio agent, Foundry agent being built. This data loss prevention policy I showed is for M365 Copilot and Copilot Chat specifically.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so we reviewed exfiltration. Let's take this last 5 minutes to look at unethical AI usage. And some of the common examples I see is instances of misusing sensitive data, trying to circumvent security policies, instances of prompt injection attempts, and even unauthorized disclosure. So I'm going to jump right into the demo. What can help here? Just exiting out of here. What can help here is communication compliance for unethical AI usage. So if we go to communication compliance, policies, wait for that to load. Essentially, you can define what types of Copilot interactions are a compliance risk. So this policy here is what we have. Can go through, I won't go through all the details of setting this up. However, here it is. So we look at conditions of the prompts and the responses. So does it match prompt shields, protected materials being accessed, unauthorized disclosure of information? So all things that can actually help, or not help, but all things that can result in data security risks. And also some of the sensitive information types. You don't always have to use trainable classifiers. You can use a combination of SITs and trainable classifiers in the conditions. Of course, you have many different conditions as well. And then once you do create this policy and there is an instance of unethical AI usage detected, where was it? Here it is. And so this would come from your compliance admin. In this case, I'm just testing in this tenant. So it came from me. And then you can customize this email message that users receive just to notify them that unethical AI usage was recognized. And in this case, I've just said unethical AI usage was detected. Please do not use it in unethical ways. Refer to our corporate policy for more details. Of course, in a real environment, you would want to expand that message and be more comprehensive from a compliance perspective as well. So very quick demo. I know I'm running out of time. Again, coming back to these pillars of AI governance, we just looked at the data security one. There is a lot of different things to consider for AI governance. Something that can help is the Copilot control system. There are security and governance capabilities, management controls, so things like licensing, metering, and also measurement and reporting of adoption, of readiness, productivity impacts. So things, it's insights and controls that can help with those AI governance pillars as well. And just to very, very quickly show you all of that, Copilot control system, where did I have it? Here it is. It's within the Microsoft Admin Center. You can go ahead and look at an overview of your Copilot analytics, how many Copilot users, your adoption score, actions that you can take to improve the Copilot rollout, security as well. Again, just high-level insights into where are your security risks, how do you remediate that, and usage, who is using Copilot, who's using Copilot Chat, and adoption metrics as well, right within the Microsoft Admin Center. So things that can help with AI governance. Alrighty, I'm running out of time. So thank you, everybody. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to stay on if that's what we do. Yeah, thank you again.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna. It was very insightful and practical session. So I really appreciated joining us today. And everyone, I know we are on time, so I wouldn't say let's do Q&A right now, but feel free to connect with Anna on LinkedIn and reach out to her if you have any questions, or you can drop your question to us and we'll make sure we'll get an answer for you. Just to make one more announcement, we have one more session next week. We have Steve, Microsoft Product Manager, who will be walking us through on content first, AI ready, building modern apps with SharePoint embedded. So feel free to join us. It's a free event like this. It's more hands-on directly from Microsoft Product Manager, and I'll happy to have you on board as well. So once again, thank you so much for joining the Hands-On Hour. A big thank you to Anna for sharing her expertise with us, and to all of you for joining and asking and reaching out to us for this event. Thank you so much. Have a good day.